Sure.
How do you do that?
All I have to do is run the recording when I fire that up.
Yeah.
And record, 30 seconds of it or whatever. And then I can send it to you and you can make it into a ringtone if you want.
I can?
Sure. Why not?
How do I do that? Well, we'll talk about it later.
You can take any sound file and turn it into a ringtone.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I'm so backward. I didn't even know that.
So you could have a robotic voice tell you that your wife is calling you and announce everybody. You could do that for everybody in your phone book. You have a custom ring for everybody in your phone book. Yes, it can be done. Just takes a little doing.
I have a Galaxy 9.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You can do that with a Razor phone from 20 years ago, if you want. Diddly do. Okay, well, you are good to go.
Okay.
You're rolling everywhere. Let me jettison the fluff here. Start a new recording. Okay. You're good to go, sir. Anytime you choose.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
You're welcome.
All right. Hello, everybody on the Rumble and YouTube feed. Good to see you there this morning. Starting the show in 3, 2, 1. And welcome. It is Perilous World Radio. Happy New Year to everyone. Oh, yeah. What is in store for us down this New Year's road? Well, one never knows, but there are things that are predictable. I'm not going to go into predicting because who knows? Things are always in flux. Things are always changing in this strange new world that we live in. It's not brave, it's strange, although there are brave people in it. I want to get into, I was going to play some audio from this near-death experience, but I've changed course because there's something that we all have to come to terms with. And I started talking about it last week, about questioning what we actually believe and whether or not it's true. I think that's essential. I think everybody has to take a look deep down inside and ask what is true as opposed to what is false. And I think that we have all absorbed a lot of things, a lot of ideas, a lot of programming that has taken us down the path, the wrong path. And I'm not sure, but I think that there's a fork in the road all the time that you can change course when you begin to realize that you didn't know you were going down the wrong path. I know, it's like driving on the freeway in LA. When I was young, before they had GPS, you had to write everything down. And I remember one time trying to get to a meeting somewhere down in Los Angeles, and I kept missing the exit. And I would get off on some unrelated exit, turn around and try it again. I could not focus well enough at that time. I'm probably 23, 24 years old. I couldn't get off on the right exit. So I just turned around and went home. Now, I think sometimes that's what we've got to do. We've got to just get off the freeway and start all over again and regroup. But if you don't know that you're going the wrong direction, if you don't know that you're being misdirected, you don't know that you need to restart. When your computer starts to malfunction, what do? You restart it. You power it down and you start it all over again and you let it reboot. We all need rebooting at some level. And of course, this is what meditation, a good meditation, not a fake, phony, weirdo meditation, but a real Christ-based meditation does for you every time you engage in it. It reboots you. It starts you. It clears out the junk, and it resets right in that moment. And I'll just give you an example. You ever felt yourself getting upset with somebody or somebody trying to push your buttons, and you suddenly, instead of reacting and going back at them, you realize, wait a minute, this is what they want me to do. They want me to get upset. They want me to doubt myself. They want me to have fear. And in that moment, you choose not to follow that prompt. See, that is the reset. It's a reset of moment. Okay? Maybe nobody's ever said it that way, but the reset of moment means new potential, new possible direction. And I've got a clip that I found of my dad. And I think it's pretty darn good for a lot of reasons, because he talks about reality. Now, the question is, how many of us actually exist in the actual reality, or are we living in a sort of a simulated reality? Because I think much of what we experience is artificial, and it's a construct of our own mind, our own thinking. So, separation from reality. Here it is, Roy Masters.
Truthfully, you shouldn't have any emotions. Oh, I know, that makes the egomaniac scream in pain. Because the root of egotism and the root of pride and the pride sustenance is rooted in emotion. You know, in the Starship Enterprise, the Captain Kirk and his compadres thought themselves to be very fortunate that they had emotions, unlike Spock, who was a Vulcan. But he had just intelligence, and he couldn't feel like they did, because he was really, technically speaking, the way all human beings should be. It's feeling that gets us into trouble. The feelings of love is not love. The feeling of hate is hate. And as a matter of fact, hate separates you from whatever love is, which is internal, and makes you addicted to taking away the pain of hate and filling the emptiness of hate separation from reality.
So, hate separation from reality. And again, this is a time to reset when you have these moments where you're challenged to face reality and see it for what it really is. Because there's a part of us, let's just call it the ego self, that prefers to see things the way we want to, as opposed to what's actually there. And there's a term that some people use called seeing the world as you are. So when you see the world as you are, you can't see what you're actually doing, why you're doing it, and where the impulse to be that way came from. Now, there are forces at work at us all the time. Now, and whether or not they're on the outside or on the inside depends upon how much you have been reacting to the world that you live in. And you don't realize that there is a void inside the human self that the dark forces of this world recognize and quickly rush to fill, right? Distraction, gratification, impulse-driven behavior, self-servingness, call it what you like. There's something in there because the environment has placed it there. You were born into it. Now, the Bible says it's called being born in sin, but sin means being incomplete. That's what it really means. It means missing the point or missing the mark. And so there's no person except for a few, maybe, and we know one of Jesus, who was not born in sin. He was born free from sin. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been the ultimate free agent to do the right thing. See, here's the problem that we all face. We are not free agents until we see that we are not doing the right thing. And then we repent and we change. But Jesus was different in the sense that he was born for one purpose, and that was always to do the right thing. But like every other human being, he had a choice. But his nature forbid him from doing the wrong thing. Now, we are on the opposite side of that because our human nature forbids us from doing the right thing until we realize we're going down the wrong path. At that point, we can actually realize that we want something other than these impulses that have driven us. We want something liberating. We want something that frees us from the compulsion to obey our instincts and our reactions. And my dad started, his service to humankind with a little pamphlet called What You Should Know About Being Upset. So he was talking about it in this last clip. Separation from reality occurs through reactions. And when you react, see, when children react, it's short-lived compared to the way adults can linger and have PTSD. All right, quick break here. I'm going to continue this because I've got so much to share with you today. Please visit FHU.com, find out about the Be Still and Know exercise, and write us at P.O. Box 1000, Grants Pass, Oregon 97528. I'm wishing you a better year this year than last. I'll be right back. All right, continuing with the topic, separation from reality, but it's already the case. Let's just put it this way. Children are closer to reality. Children are closer to truth because they aren't born with the biases and the traumas and all the mess of life. They're born with a clean slate. We're all born with a clean slate, but we always will have the proclivity to muddy it up. Okay, we all know that at this point, or most of us do anyway. And let's see here. Where do I go with this? Because, let me see here. Let me see where I want to go with this. Yes. So from the TV show, The Chosen, Season 2, Episode 3, there is just a profound moment where the disciples are sitting around a campfire, and one of them, I just lost it. Chosen. Here it is.
Sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life. Like, when I look at myself from the outside, it doesn't always feel like me. Like I have to do something great. But I know I'm not great. I know it even more now, being with him.
I was meditating 30 some odd years ago, and I saw a vision in this meditation. And in the vision, I saw a hand inside a glove. And I realized that I was the glove, and there was an alien hand that was in my glove. That hand was not my hand. That changed my whole life. That vision that I had of I wasn't living my own life. Had I not realized that, whose life would I be living?
Yes. It was a pivotal moment in my life, and I will never forget it. And then when I heard this statement from The Chosen, Season 2, Episode 3, I was reminded of this moment in my life where things started to change. But it only changed because I struggled, as everybody does, with the invisible hand inside the glove. We all have it. And it's installed by the environment. It's not your fault. It's there. It slips in. And what happens is if you take a look at people who have what's called gender dysphoria, what is the strongest influence in their upbringing? That's the question. So let's look at it from a point of view of, in a family structure, the way that our Creator designed the family. Father relates to Christ, mother relates to father, children relate to mother through this kind of pecking order. But in the modern world, something happened, and really it is a design of evil. It is a design from the dark side itself to make scrambled eggs out of the human brain, and therefore affect the soul, right? There's sort of, this is the weaponizing of environment. We hear about all kinds of things that are weaponized, but the environment itself, when you come into this world in the relationship between the husband and the wife, that itself has been weaponized, and the laws have supported that, the weaponization of man against woman and vice versa. And so we get to this idea, which was described at the turn of the century in the Russian manual on brainwashing called Psychopolitics. And I think I have a minute to play the first clip. Yes, I do. Pay attention now. Listen closely to what is being explained. This is the introduction to the Russian manual on brainwashing psychopolitics. Here it comes.
In a capitalistic state, you are aided on all sides by the corruption of the philosophy of man and the times. You will discover that everything will aid you in your campaign to seize, control, and use all mental healing to spread our doctrine and rid us of our enemies within their own borders. Use the courts, use the judges, use the constitution of the country, use its medical societies and its laws to further our ends. Do not stint in your labor in this direction. And when you have succeeded, you will discover that you can now effect your own legislation at will, and you can by careful organization of healing societies, by constant campaigns about the terrors of society, by pretense as to your effectiveness, make your capitalist himself by his own appropriations, finance a large portion of the quiet communist conquest of the nation.
Does this sound familiar to you yet? You see what's happening in our world today? Just recently, they've uncovered all of this this corruption in the state of Minnesota, but it's everywhere. California is probably worse than Minnesota. And they've discovered that this is happening in every state in this country, that there is fraud that was enabled, fraud and corruption that was enabled. But the idea is that the psychopolitics is the disruption of normality, the destruction of systems that make sense and that work, and the scrambling of the human brain, and therefore making the soul subject to the workings of a corrupted mind. This is what's happened. There's no way around it. So this is what I want to focus on today in this new year. And to understand what it is that we're dealing with is super important, because then, like when I began to realize that there was a hand inside my glove, I began to realize that that hand was articulating. It was an invisible hand that I was a puppet of until I realized that that was the case. Now, this was after probably 35 years of meditating, maybe longer. But I started somewhere, and you've got to start somewhere to begin to, regroup and reset. And you can do that every day at FHU.com. We have the Be Still and Know exercise. And on the premium side of the website, tens of thousands of hours from Roy Masters, FHU.com, and I'll be right back. Right, continuing with the program, the mind control aspect of this has to be understood. And the mainstream media avoids this topic like the plague, even though it gets brought up from time to time. People it's sad that Alex Jones is on the cutting edge of all of this, because half the time he's completely off his rocker and half the time he's right. But when a person, lacks 51% credibility, which, when you're wrong half the time, nobody knows what to believe. But my dad was really onto this. As a matter of fact, he published this little manuscript about brainwashing, the psychopolitics. And he says in this upcoming clip that he couldn't sell it because people would react terribly when they realized that the psychopolitics of the communist machine had taken over in our country at least 50, maybe more years ago. Maybe more. It started 70, remember Roe versus Wade, and then they started turning the laws against the human race. So, here comes a clip of Roy Masters.
These are some of the techniques that will be used, but mostly the press will be used. Thank God you have talk radio and Fox News and a few other publications, newspapers, that are taking up the channel. But I want to tell you that it will be very formidable, and but the very best of you, the wisest of you, those who can handle stress, and stress has been put on you gradually over the years, the stress of modern living, they call it, but they've multiplied your sensitivity to stress. How have they done it? Well, before the Republican government came in, you had about 40 years of liberalism, didn't you? And so how they did it was to give wrong answers to problems. The school system, they create problems by their educational system. So it looks like the problem is the kids, but the problem is not the kids, it's the teachers. Of course, then it wasn't the teachers, it was the universities who were infiltrated. So you have a few people controlling many. Do you understand this?
Do you understand it yet? Are you beginning to get the picture? That the communist textbook on psychopolitics showed them how to do it, and they went into, and this is two places where you can already see it. You can see it right away: education and the health system. Okay? Because that's where we tend to gravitate to let the government teach the children whatever the hell they want. And then we put our life in the hands of these so-called healers, the doctors, the psychiatrists, the mind melders, mind menders, whatever they are. We tend to run to those people because the problem is that when your brains have been turned into scrambled eggs, it's hard to know what to do much of the time. And so here comes another clip of Roy Masters. This is K4526. So here it comes.
So therefore you raise money and throw money at the schools, but then you give them power to hurt your children more. This is all in the book. It's not my book, actually. It is 66 pages of how your country is being conquered.
And that's what I'm talking about. He's talking about the textbook The Brainwashing Textbook on Psychopolitics by Leventi Beria is what he's talking about.
I wasn't able to sell them because when people would open up the booklet, they'd drop it because they wouldn't understand it. They're so terribly frightened when you read that what I'm talking about has already taken place. And the solutions to your problems in medicine are basically the same thing. What's making us sick these days is an article from, the New York Times, no less. For most Americans, what's making us sick is an epidemic of diagnosis. It's the New York Times. For most Americans, the biggest health threat is not avian flu, West Nile, or mad cow disease. It's our healthcare system. Because doctors make mistakes. We do make mistakes. But you can't be a victim of a medical error if you're not in the system. The larger the threat posed up by American medicine is more and more of us are seeing to be drawn into a system, not because of an epidemic or disease, but because the epidemic of diagnosis.
Okay, so there it is. We are programmed to fail from a very early age, handed over to a school system, which I did not do, because I knew what my experience in the school system was, and it was terrible. It was weird. And so we're handed over, and they start to monkey with our mind from the time that we're little. Now, I grew up in a very different time, starting in the 1950s. But by the 60s, it was starting to change already. But at least my first 10 years of life wasn't completely contaminated by bad teaching and by bad ideas. The 60s, social revolution, the madness. By the 70s, it was basket weaving and God knows what. By the 80s, who knows? It was the blooming of the social revolution. The 70s and 80s, the protests of the Vietnam War and all the rest of it. I'm not saying that the war was a good war, but the communists, we were fighting communism. Now we got them running New York City. You see how it goes. It's a precipitous slope, a very slippery slope.
So it goes on to say that they actually, well, how can I say it? If you've got an ache in your leg and a pain in your chest, or you've got a little arthritis, or you have a cough or a sneeze, they call it a disease. They've got a remedy for it, and you slowly but surely become overcome by your desire to fix your symptoms with just taking a pill or something. So you really never, very rarely ever, look at yourself, because the minute you have a headache or cough or whatever it might be, an endless loop of thoughts, emotional swings, call it bipolar, whatever you want to call it, they have an answer for every little thing.
Yeah. Sadly, and the point I'm making is that once you've been set up to fail, you become counterintuitive and then self-sabotaging. You become your own worst enemy. And you don't see that there's an invisible hand, invisible to you, might be visible to other people, but invisible to you that you don't see, that is directing you. The hand is a metaphor. There's a spiritual component that, like a body snatcher. Something comes in and body snatches you. And you may remember a time where something happened to you. It could be a trauma, could be anything that throws you out of alignment with reality. Could be anything. Could be seeing somebody do something that you get shocked, that you never expected somebody that you look up to do something wrong. Who knows? It could be any number of things. Okay?
And so, slowly but surely, you reach for the remedy, but the remedy is not the remedy. It actually is the problem. It's the cause of your next problem. And that makes you reach, because you've no longer depend on yourself. You've lost your selfhood. The more they cater to your weakness, and the more you say, there, God loves you as you are, and medicine loves you as you are, it's not your fault. It's a physical thing. You don't have to look at yourself. Let me take the pain away. So they give you a pill, and it's no different. They either take the pain away or they take your consciousness away.
Same thing. See? Because I was talking to Mr. Jones about this. Pain is a necessary aspect of growth. There's a movie out where this man has no sense of pain, and he ends up doing all kinds of horrible harm to himself and not realizing it. And, there are people that have that condition. It's very rare where they don't know that they have been cut or that they have, damaged their body. But see, this is in a way what a chemical straitjacket does to people. It disables your ability to learn from suffering, from problems. Because when you take a pill to get rid of anxiety and all the rest of it, then the consequences of whatever's happening to you go with that. When you have pain, when you have anxiety, when you feel guilty or whatever, somebody might have laid a guilt trip on you and made you feel guilty for something you never did. But if you don't have any pain, how can you ever resolve it? See? So that's just part of this bigger equation, that the dark side is very, very sophisticated. It's very complex. It knows every single centimeter of the human experience, and it knows how to plot and plan misdirection and sabotage like you can't even imagine. And when you watch these interesting movies and you see people interacting, in strange and convoluted ways, the dark side orchestrates all of that in real life. Real life. Tyler Robinson, the assassin, the so-called assassin, the accused of Charlie Kirk. What was going on in that person's mind? When a person slashes the throat of a girl sitting on a train, what was going on in that person's mind? When a guy goes up to a CEO of a health company and shoots him in the back, what was going on? What was the influence that was causing these people to do the things that they were doing? And they thought it was their own idea. All right, FHU.com, you'll find out about the firewall for your mind. It's called the Be Still and Know exercise. How many times do I have to say it before you go, yeah, that's for me? FHU.com. I'll be right back. All right, continuing. This discussion is not an easy one because it requires your agreement. In other words, if you don't want to see the truth, which many people, they want to laugh it off. They want to say, yeah. Like I heard a discussion this morning about the memes that are making fun of Tim Walz and the corruption, billions of dollars missing from Minnesota. But the memes reduce the severity of the truth of the thing. Yeah, it's funny for a moment, but it actually is like taking an anxiety pill, because you see this going on. You're thinking, why aren't these people being put in jail? Why aren't there consequences for people that do evil? Why does it take so long for people? I mean, anyway, my point. That's my point. And so here comes another Roy Masters.
So you think you're okay when you're not, and you don't see how you're being manipulated. Through that depends, you're linked. If you didn't need anything from anyone, you couldn't be controlled by anyone. The whole idea is to create a need, see? And then you get control through it. Now, the state of America, I don't think you really understand the forces arrayed against you. You're 300 million people, and there's only a small handful of people that control the media, and Well, they guide how you vote. Some of us can resist, but more and more people cannot resist.
Well, it's been that way increasingly, and especially now. The problem with the young people who have been contaminated through the education system, through the social media, and they don't think for themselves. They don't know how to think for themselves. Most people, even if you want to think for yourself, it's like the movie 1984, the story 1984, because their every thought is controlled by some external manager. You have somebody like that in your life that you've known or maybe know, where you have a manager and if you step out of line, they start to make you aware of it, painfully aware of it. Yeah, you haven't been allowed to think for yourself, and you've been set up to self-sabotage because, see, the Manchurian Candidate, let's think about it this way. The original story, these guys were captured in North Korea, hypnotized and programmed. But once they were hypnotized, all they needed was a signal that actuated them to do whatever they were programmed and hypnotized to do. So then they had remote control over the person. They were walking, what you call the walking wounded, the walking hypnotized. And then when the handler would show up, whether it was a phone call or whether it was the presence of a person, I mean, Sirhan, who murdered one of the Kennedy brothers, said that there was a woman in a polka dot dress. It could have been anything if you think about it objectively. And he himself, Sirhan said, I don't remember any of it. And actually, I believe him. Because when a person sleepwalks, they don't know where they are. When they wake up, it's like, how did I get down the hall? Why am I at the edge of the stairs? They're in a semi-psychotic, hypnotic state. And in that, they're just sort of being other-directed by something else. Something else.
They begin to doubt themselves, and after it's a disease. Pretty soon it spreads to everyone, and eventually the most powerful person, the strongest person, cannot resist, and that's it. We're gone, and you won't even know how it happened to you. You think you're being loved, and you wake up one morning, and the girl of your dreams or the prince of your dreams is a nightmare of schemes. And I was saying about Stalin, he eventually killed even the peasants that voted for him, that kept him in power. When he died, there was miles and miles of people viewing his coffin. He killed 30 million people. You see, there's an affection for the tyrant. There's an affinity for tyrants. And you all have that. And I'm trying to make that point throughout the program. You've got to break this chain. You've got to see what is about to come upon you. Otherwise, you're helpless against it. You can't fight it if you don't see it. And then you have to have the tools. And the tools are held from you. It's a game. It's mind game. And America is done. And half America is gone. We know that half's gone. You don't need to be so needy. Need is not love. Well, it could be if it was a need for your creator.
Mm-hmm. You're beginning to see that there's a bigger picture to all of this chaos. And if chaos had a puzzle and you started to put the pieces together, you would see these bits and pieces coming together to form something recognizable. And that is the influence of a dark hand inside the glove of so many people. Not a dark force, let's put it that way. But the hand, what does they say? The hand that rocks the cradle? The hand is such an amazing instrument. Can build and make and destroy, create amazing things, music and artwork and structures and the hand. Can you imagine what the world would be without hands? I mean, that's what they do in the Congo when when somebody steals. But what if there was an alternative hand that looked like yours, but was being acted upon by a force you didn't recognize? That is what I'm going to continue talking about in the next segment. FHU.com. Check it out. All right, welcome back. Continuing the subject of the Russian textbook on psychopolitics. That's what it is. It's brainwashing. And you've all been brainwashed at some level. Culture is brainwashing. Music is brainwashing. And the environment is steeped in influences, which, if you look at it objectively, you will begin to realize that, just to give you an example, even on, and especially on news outlets where people are watching the events of the day unfold, all of a sudden pops up a pill for anxiety medication, or a pill for this, or a pill for that. And the side effects and the warnings on the product are twice as long as the message. The message is, you use this and you'll feel better. But then the side effects, oh my gosh, the side effects, the warnings. And, for people who smoked for many years, they made them put cancer warnings on the side of the cigarette package. People still smoke. Now they've got this new thing called vaping, which I think is going to be even worse eventually. God only knows what's in this stuff. But people, a person convinced against their will is of the same opinion still. And so, yeah, that's a warning for somebody else. You're going to get cancer. And then they continue to do it until they get cancer. And that's when they start to change, until the consequences force them to change and to suffer and to rethink their position, or to be forced to stop. Okay? And so what we have is a society that is on autopilot. That's what he was saying. That's what my dad was saying. Autopilot. Now, here comes another clip of the Russian Manual on Brainwashing Psychopolitics.
My psychopolitics create chaos, leave a nation leaderless, kill our enemies, and bring to earth, through communism, the greatest peace man has ever known. Chapter 1, the history and definition of psychopolitics. Although punishment for its own sake may not be entirely without recompense, it is nevertheless true that the end and goal of all punishment is the indoctrination of the person being punished with an idea, whether that idea be one of restraint or obedience. In that any ruler has, from time beyond memory, needed the obedience of his subjects in order to accomplish his ends, he has thus resorted to punishment. This is true of every tribe and state in the history of man.
Punishment. Well, this is, I was talking about smoking. And it's funny because, it's not funny, it's ironic that when let me just put it to you this way, tobacco is not necessarily what kills people. It's the additives that are put in there. So they can take something that might be somewhat benign. I know that, for 100 years before the modern era, people smoked and they did all kinds of things and they didn't end up with the kind of conditions that we have today. So it's weaponized. Every single thing is weaponized by some force, some company, someone who comes up with the idea. And I think it's evil that supplies those ideas. And so we end up with a mass formation of people. And so the author, Matthias Desmet, wrote a book on mass formation. It's about psychosis, not being able to tell the difference between right and wrong. And here's what Matthias Desmet says about how you can't wake up the masses.
In 1930, the resistance chose to stop to speaking out in the Soviet Union. In 1935, it stopped to speak out in Nazi Germany. And within a period of 6 months, the destruction campaign started. There was enough support in the population to start the destruction campaigns. So when you understand that, you understand that no matter what happens, the people who are not in the grip of the mass formation have to continue to speak out. And the important thing is, they should realize that they will not wake up the masses. That's crucial. Such scholars as Gustave Le Bon, who studied the psychology of the masses, have remarked that if a large mass emerges in a society, there is always a group who is not in the grip of it. And this group typically wants to wake up the people in the masses. They try to show them, they are baffled, and they try to show them how absurd the beliefs are that the group that live in the group. And this group tries to wake the masses up, and it doesn't succeed. This group usually won't succeed in waking up the masses. That's almost impossible. But, and that's crucial, Gustave Le Bon mentioned already in his famous work, The Psychology of the Crowd, published in 1895, he said it's not because this dissident group doesn't succeed in waking up the masses that its speech has no effect.
Okay, so the mass formation, Dr. Robert Malone, who invented some of the technology of the mRNA, talked about mass formation, and he was taken off the air because they don't want you to realize that you're influenced by the crowd. That's what the mass formation is. We're all influenced. I talked about the environment. We are all programmed by the environment. And the dysfunction that exists within the environment, that is present within the environment when we're born, and then it sort of is magnified. It's the dysfunction of one family combined with the dysfunction of many families is a force multiplier for chaos and confusion. And then in the last 4 years, everybody wonders, they scratch their head, what happened when Joe Biden got in? Suddenly, the insanity of transsexualism exploded. What happened? Well, it was a moment that was ripe with potential for the devil. Let's put it that way. And so several years ago, a young woman named Chloe Cole started to awaken. And I want you to hear her story.
It's the lack of faith that led to that hole in my identity where I felt like I had to seek something more. I didn't feel like I was comfortable with myself because I didn't understand why life was the way that it was. I didn't know that I was created in God's image, that I was perfect the way that I was, and that sure, I was going to struggle in life, but that was a guarantee. And in order to move through that in a healthy way, I would have to hold God close and keep the scripture and keep to close prayer. Because I wasn't really raised in a very religious home. I was raised in a pretty secular, agnostic home. My mom was raised Catholic, my dad was raised Mormon, but it just wasn't really a part of my life. And I think that was the biggest part leading to the confusion that I had around being female, around my body, around puberty. And transgenderism took that hole.
Okay. You see, what happens is that nature abhors a vacuum, and when there's a hole of meaning, I'm going to call it the hole, the void of meaning. That there's a lack of meaning, a lack of substance in the person's life that gives them a sense of why they're here. The dark side rushes in and fills that void with something that makes people feel as if, well, now I found it. I found the meaning that I was looking for. And unfortunately, the mind does not have a firewall. This is the problem of the environment. That when you have these dysfunctional families, and everybody has a dysfunctional, Adam and Eve had a dysfunctional family. So this is, be clear Nobody came from a perfect family, but some families were more functional and more grounded than others. And so you must thank your lucky stars if you had a family that had good principles and good morals and didn't overdo the church thing, but exposed you to it so that, and you could see it working in their lives. But if you didn't see that, if you didn't have that, so there's a big gaping hole, and this is where the dark side rushes in. All right, FHU.com is where you find out about the firewall for your mind. It's called Be Still and Know. And it actually is used by the military. PatriotOutreach.org. Colonel Tony Monaco is on the program frequently, talking about success stories of people who came back from the theater of war with post-traumatic stress and recovered. FHU.com. Continuing with the program, I've got more Chloe Cole that I need to play for you. And this is her several years ago when she first started to show up on the scene, talking about her experience. And I think at this time she was only around 18 years old. And I just think that you have to hear what she's saying.
Over the past decade, there has been as high as a 4,000% increase in children being referred to so-called gender clinics across the United States. I was one of these children. My name is Chloe Cole, and I am an 18-year-old former transgender child. I transitioned from the age of 12 up until 16 when I realized all was a lie. My story is a cautionary tale. Children and parents across the country have been caught off guard by gender ideology. Discussions about transgenderism and gender identity went from being a relatively benign social oddity to a doctrine that has invaded nearly every academic, medical, and educational institution, seemingly overnight. How did we get to this point? How did we get to the point where nearly every pediatric institution in the country considers it best practice to remove the healthy breast tissue of children while administering drugs typically used to chemically castrate high-risk sex offenders? Raising these important questions is not bigoted, and the refusal of activists to give straightforward answers should be seen as a major red flag.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, Bill Bennett, who was the secretary of the school system, secretary of education, and he made a statement about the way that the school system was brainwashing and demoralizing children. This was probably 25, maybe 30 years ago. But he said under normal circumstances, what was being done to children in the school system would be declared an act of war. You see, there is a war against innocence. There's a war against meaning. There's a war against truth in our country. And unfortunately, the war has not been won yet, but the battles that are being won are frightening. I mean, look, we got communists running one of the most important cities in the country, New York City. But I heard another interesting statistic that in that race for mayor, Mamdani, only 400,000 people voted out of a city of 10 million people. So it was an apathy vote. And they knew that there was a tremendous voter apathy, that people were disengaged, that they actually didn't care. Because guess what? Ever since Rudy Giuliani and a couple of others who made sure that law enforcement was present and that the laws were obeyed. But, over a period of time, there were very, very bad people running that state. And people thought, oh, Eric Adams was going to be the next one to do a good thing. No, he compromised too. And at a certain point, people become disengaged and they don't care. And this is what happened with Mamdani. It isn't that communism is popular in New York City. As a matter of fact, the largest population of Jewish people in the world beside Israel is in New York City. What happened to those people? He's anti-Jewish. He's a Muslim. And he applauded the raids that killed 1,200 people, the October attack on Israeli Jews. He was supportive of that. What happened to people being interested in doing the right thing? That's the question. Chloe Cole goes on to explain, giving more testimony. Here it comes.
People across the entire political spectrum who believe that this practice is morally wrong have been told that they are fascists or bigots for even questioning this atrocity. Others have been convinced by self-proclaimed gender specialists that this is the only treatment that will not end in your child committing suicide. I believe Americans deserve to know the truth about this radical and perverse ideology, marketed as necessary and life-saving healthcare. I was only 12 years old when I told my parents that I was a boy. Like many parents in that situation, they didn't have a clue what to do. They were scared and desperate for answers. They wanted what every parent wants for their child, for me to be okay and thrive. At 13 years old, on the advice of so-called medical professionals, I was put on puberty-blocking medication, and only a month later, I was given my first testosterone injection. The gender clinic presented my parents with the classic false dichotomy regarding children with gender dysphoria.
Now, do you realize that in your local public school, that they can't even dispense an aspirin or an ibuprofen or Tylenol without the parents' permission? And yet, they want to transition your kids. See, this is not health. This is ideological. It's not a health issue, but it's made to be a health issue. It's made to be a life and death issue. And, you know, for people like Chloe Cole and others who speak out, this is how the mass formation gets addressed and begins to eventually change. Now, we did it with Trump twice, but right now there's a disillusionment with Trump. And because of the media, because of the left, because of the liars and the psychopaths who keep spewing total nonsense about what's actually happening, existential threat, dictator, Hitler, and the mushy-brained people. They know that a certain number of those people are just going to accept that, right? And so Matthias Desmet goes on to explain the mass formation and how you can't stop speaking.
To the contrary, its speech has a crucial effect. The speech of the dissidents constantly disturbs the mass formation, and that makes that it doesn't go so deep that the masses arrive at the final stage where they start to commit atrocities. So if you speak out in a quiet way, and if you don't really try to convince them, but just live up to your ethical duty of articulating your own opinion, then you will see that you disturb the mass formation, that it doesn't go deeper and deeper, and something crucial happens then. That's your opinion, that's mine, and you can take it or leave it, it doesn't matter, but I will time and time again articulate my own opinion. And in that way, the mass formation is constantly disturbed, and then something crucial happens.
You see, the point, though, is that if there's a saying about speaking truth to power, but the power is only the power that you give. You grant power. Remember the movie Braveheart? You know, you could take my life, but you can't take my freedom. He wasn't willing to sacrifice his freedom to capitulate. And they tore him to pieces. William Wallace. He was more dedicated to the prospect of doing the right thing for the right reason, whatever it may have been at the time. And, but most people aren't that way. Most people are very easy to sway and convince and to get them to give in. And this is the problem, because once you begin to give in, it's a domino effect. Now, you reverse the domino effect by learning how to put up that firewall for your mind. It's called Be Still and Know at FHU.com. I'll be right back. All right, continuing the program with more testimony from Chloe Cole, talking about what happened in her life starting at the age of 12.
Would you rather have a dead daughter or a living son? Given these options, what loving parent wouldn't choose to transition their child? scared for my life. My parents were prepared to sign anything the doctors asked. This was not informed consent. It was a decision forced under extreme duress. At 15, I went under the knife for a radical double mastectomy, the kind that breast cancer patients get. This was after I was sexually assaulted at school by a male student. I just told myself to man up, but I lived my life in constant hatred of my breasts. I started binding, which deformed my breasts as well as my ribcage. I was afraid, and I couldn't wait to finally protect my body from the threat of further molestation. At 16, I finally realized what happened to me, that I had made a huge mistake. I realized the beauty of motherhood was stolen from me by medical professionals who my family entrusted me to. I realized after maturing a bit more that a child does not, in fact, know who they are. At 12 years old, I realized that I wanted to be what I always was and forever will be, a woman. With this realization came a series of challenges that were far worse than the transition. Somehow, I had to get myself off these drugs and tell everyone in my entire life that I was not who I said I was. My parents were shocked and felt like they failed me on every level imaginable. My friends all turned against me because I was evidence that their beliefs were a lie. I was a joke. I was a fraud. I was many years behind in development, incapable of feeding my future children, and worst of all, completely alone. Even the medical professionals who got me into this mess now have no idea what to do with me, and they refuse to help me. It almost killed me, as it has killed many who regret transition. The big question still remains. I was a 12-year-old introduced to the idea that they could do something as ridiculous as change their sex. I was and still am the type of kid that never really fit into social norms. I was a tomboy, I was shy, I didn't socialize easily. At 11, I made my first Instagram account. I had unmonitored internet access. It wasn't long until I was exposed to a ton of LGBTQ content online. And I had never seen anything like it. You mean that all I have to do is subscribe to this ideology, and then I'm an accepted, celebrated, and valued member of the most talked about community on earth? Transgender people are the most celebrated subset of this community. I saw the unbelievable amounts of praise and attention they got online, and subconsciously I yearned to have a piece of it. With every milestone in my medical transition, I was given more and more attention and celebration. It was the ultimate high. Even in person, I got more attention. Girls would have crushes on me, and I would have people come up to me in the hallways asking to make friends, and it was unprecedented for me. I felt like a celebrity. Being a kid, I didn't know just how superficial these relationships were until they all suddenly abandoned me just for struggling to become who I am. Much of this gender confusion is based on old regressive stereotypes of men and women, which are now being reinforced with hormones and surgeries. Women can have short hair and be interested in playing sports and partaking in physical activities. Men can grow their hair out and wear makeup. It does not change their biology. The truth is, this practice is harming more and more children every day. What will we do to protect this most vulnerable group? Up until now, the media has been parroting the same ideologically driven talking points. Affirm, affirm, affirm. The closest I've touched to mainstream media is a Forbes journalist who wrote a hit piece on me calling basic human biology transphobic. There are many detransitioners speaking out, and they are ignored by the institutions most responsible for the search of truth. Up until today, most politicians on the left and right have done nothing but get into Twitter fights on this issue. There is no second chance at childhood, so we must do our best as adults to guide our children to pathways that lead to healthy bodies and minds instead of depression and disfigurement. No child deserves to suffer under the knife of a gender-affirming surgeon. America's children, all children, deserve better. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Well, she's one that survived, but how many will not? Just look at how many of these people end up being mass killers. What happens to them once they're willing to destroy and kill their own identity? I think that makes it easier for them to go out and do it to others. You see, because, there's an expression called dead naming. Okay, so they actually go to the point of changing the name and to get rid of the old name which has attached to it another identity or an original identity. It's weird. It's insane. It's almost like being in hell for these people. And then what they do is they bring this aspect of hell to earth. Is what they do. And it is an epidemic of insanity. It clearly is. And it's part of a mass formation described by, and I'll play another clip for you, Matthias Desmet.
The masses are always self-destructive. That means if they continue to exist, they will slowly exhaust themselves. Their power will decrease slowly. And the power of the group who doesn't go along with the masses and who continues to live up to these ethical principles of speaking out will slowly increase. And at a certain moment, the two lines cross each other, and the small group has a stronger psychological effect than the masses itself. I think that there are more people waking up these days, but at the same time, the system itself will increase the repression, I think. It will increase the repression. So it will get more difficult, I think, in the years to come. As soon as you understand that the mechanism of mass formation is identical to hypnosis, then you also understand that mass formation, in the end, boils down to a population that is in the grip of a voice.
Mass formation is similar to hypnosis. He said it. He said it. Mass formation is hypnosis. But hypnosis depends upon the agreement of the person, whether or not they're consciously agreeing or subconsciously agreeing, depends upon the agreement of the person falling under the spell.
And if the only voice that speaks out is the voice of the leaders of the masses, then the masses will become more and more fanatically convinced that they have. Yes, that is the first rule of all propaganda: make sure that you are the only one who speaks out. So to have a huge aggressive potential, and hence the population accepts that this small group imposes unilaterally its social contract to the population. A totalitarian state is based on a completely different psychological mechanism. It's based on the mechanism of mass formation, of this mass hypnosis. Meaning that if the resistance, when it is confronted with the emergence of a totalitarian state, chooses to speak out, it chooses to die. It will be destroyed, because the hypnosis will get deeper and deeper, and it will arrive at that ultimate stage where the masses become radically convinced that everyone who doesn't go along with them is inhumane, lacks all solidarity and citizenships, and hence deserves to be destroyed.
Yep. We bring it upon ourselves. We are our own worst enemy. One more on the Russian manual on psychopolitics.
Today, Russian culture has evolved more certain and definite methods of aligning and securing the loyalties of persons and populaces and of enforcing obedience upon them. This modern outgrowth of old practice is called psychopolitics. The stupidity and narrowness of nations not blessed with Russian reasoning has caused them to rely upon practices which are today too ancient and outmoded for the rapid and heroic pace of our time. And in view of the tremendous advance of Russian culture in the field of mental technologies, begun with the glorious work of Pavlov and carried forward so ably by later Russians, it would be strange that an art and science would not evolve totally devoted to the aligning of loyalties and extracting the obedience of individuals and multitudes.
Yes, indeed. Look at what the left is. The left lines up against such things as ending child transitioning, transsexualizing. The left, almost in perfect unison, sides with criminals in our society. The left sides with the dark side on almost every single issue. The left. And what is the left? Well, the left is the extenuation of the communist playbook. That's why I'm playing this stuff for you today. You see it. We've heard about it. People say it. Then they're mocked and ridiculed. But, it's funny because it's not funny. It's ironic. RFK Jr. wants to make America healthy again. The left hates him because there are so many people with their hands in the pocket of big funding for all kinds of weird stuff. Weird stuff. So these people who are on the left, these so-called politicians, they're all imposters. Now, what is an imposter, you ask? I have an answer.
The term imposter syndrome was coined in 1978. The original idea behind the term hasn't changed very much, although it is now applied to a wider range of circumstances. We see the syndrome is when somebody has a sense that they are going to fail to live up to the expectations of other people. They are not authentically accomplished. They don't appear to be successful. They are feeling like they're a fraud. When they make mistakes or have failures, they don't view that as simply feedback on their performance. Rather, they tend to look at it as indicating something about their personality, something about their worthiness as a person. So they internalize setbacks, particularly in work settings. That's where we really see imposter syndrome being used. That term is applied often to work and specifically to certain professional environments.
Such as politics. Look at Eric Swalwell, imposter. Look at AOC, imposter. Not a real politician. Yes, a real politician, but not a real politician. Because a politician, what is a politician anyway? A politician, and I've heard it said that religion and politics don't mix, but they're the same thing. They are mixed. Awaken, will you? Be still and know at FHU.com. I'll be right back. And continuing the program, I want to play a couple more of a recent interview with Chloe Cole. And because she explains the void. She was filling a void with some kind of weird ideology that found her at a vulnerable time. But that weird ideology becomes a metastasizing cancer of confusion. Listen to her.
It made it so that I basically became my own God, where I could influence the way that other people perceived and spoke of me, and even the way that my body looked and functioned through the usage of these drugs. But it was a false God. It was a false idol that I was chasing. I was chasing myself rather than my real purpose in accepting myself as a daughter of God. And even after I detransitioned, I still was searching for a purpose. And I didn't find it until I came to faith. And I think that God spoke through me, or spoke to me through the wonderful Christian men and women in my life who surrounded me during that vulnerable point in time.
Yeah, so what happens is you come to purpose through faith, which is what she just described. But the problem with the left is that they talk about, Nancy Pelosi talks about being a Catholic or the children, but she's totally pro-abortion. So she can't really have any faith. It's all a facade. They're all pretenders. They're all imposters. And those imposters cannot find the meaning of life if they don't reject the lie. Think about what is being said here. They have to reject the lie in order to find and know the truth that sets them free. Here comes another clip of the imposter syndrome.
Number one is really about who tends to be affected. We usually think of imposter syndrome as being more common among certain groups. People who earn a lot of money, high achievers, people who had parents who are both highly successful, people who have taken over like a family business. We see this quite a bit with like a father who started a business and a son who took it over. He doesn't feel like he can live up to the father's expectations and run the business as well as the father did. We see that imposter syndrome is more common among women, minorities, and as I mentioned before, among certain types of professionals. Typically, we see it in careers or professions where the appearance of being intelligent is critical to success. So it is common among mental health professionals, including counselors, but it's also common among professors like academics, lawyers, business people, especially kind of high-ranking business people, and students.
Mm-hmm. Students who become politicians. Most of them go to these highbrow colleges where they are brainwashed and spoon-fed nonsense and confusion and gender ideology and God knows what. And they become the future misleaders, taking, like lemmings, the followers off the cliff. And that's where it's at. That's where we're at right now. We have people who are disengaged because they don't trust the system anymore. I think that's part of the program. Part of the program is to set people up to have expectations that can never be fulfilled, and that their expectation, then they lower their expectation, and then they get into the gray zone where who cares what happens, and then they go to the dark side, which is, well, if everybody's going to do it, then why shouldn't I? Why shouldn't I? Why shouldn't I get my share, my piece of that pie? Isn't that how it works? The politicians, and look at the net worth of these people. The one from Minnesota, the Somalian woman who married her brother, millions, tens of millions of dollars just for being a politician and make $150,000 a year. Where does that come from? Oh yeah, it comes from influence peddlers and buyers. One more to pay it off from Chloe Cole.
It was then that I came to know that he doesn't let anything go untouched. No matter how painful the things you've been through are, no matter what you've lost, no matter what you're grieving, all of that is going to be part of God's purpose. And even when you're deep in it, even when you don't know what life is going to look like from that point on, you just have to trust in God's plan. And in doing so, I found great purpose. I have found meaning in healing in my life that would not have been possible before. And sometimes I just feel so helpless, like I'm such a fool. Like I don't deserve the things that God has put in my life, but it's not up to me. All that matters is that I use my testimony to help other people, to help other children who are confused, to help other families who are lost.
That's her purpose. You know what a commandment means? Literally translated, it means signpost. Go this way, don't go that way. So this is important because people like Chloe Cole and somebody like you out there, you talk to people, you talk to many people, and they talk to other people. And if you're silent or if you don't say anything, what are you then? Well, you're just allowing the problem to continue. So be a part of the change, be a part of the solution. And if you know somebody that could really use the help, turn them on to this program. Tell them, listen to this show. Maybe you'll begin to understand. Perilous World Radio on Rumble, all one word, or visit FHU.com and find out more about the Be Still and Know exercise. Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Okay.
Oh,
Bye-bye, spaces, people.
My battery died in my
Oh, uh-oh.
in my mouse.